meeting to order. Begin with reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, because this is a workshop meeting, we are going to have one public comment opportunity. Do we have one at the end, John?
Yes.
Okay, at the end of the discussion, but we're going to start right now with the discussion of the enrollment space issue.
Well, good evening to everybody. We have Karen from Cooperative Strategies who is on the line, and just kind of to set the tone a little bit, or the stage for this evening. At the last board meeting, there was a presentation on the survey results. The prior survey results were of different options that we're considering to address enrollment space issues. As part of that discussion, we narrowed those options and decided on going back out to the community about two options, as well as adding an additional option for consideration. Tonight, we had made the decision, and we did. We closed the results for that survey at noon today. Hindsight, probably could have done it a day in advance, would have given you some time to review the results. Board members didn't get the full listing of all the comments up until about a couple hours ago. But we did get a lot of comments over the holiday break, which was good, all the way up until noon today. So tonight Karen will walk us through what the results are. We'll review them, discuss them. If possible to narrow any, great. If not, we'll kind of proceed forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Karen. Karen, are you there?
I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute you so I'm not hearing two of myself, okay?
Great.
Perfect.
All right. So like John said, my name is Karen. I'm with Cooperative Strategies. I've been Scott's counterpart throughout this process. At this point, we've pretty much gone through the majority of the process. So what I'm going to do tonight is go through the final options that were discussed at the last meeting and show you the results of that survey. So here's the agenda. I'm sure you've seen this arrow before with the planning process. So as we get into these options, if you remember from last time, there were three options that you asked us to dig a little deeper into. So the three options were option A, which was previously option 2, which is construct additions at Edgar Road and Clark. Option B, which was previously option 5 plus option 4A, was to construct an addition at Hickson, which would make Hickson a 6-8 middle school. And then Seeger and Givens would serve as an elementary school as either one neighborhood school or two schools, so one lottery in one neighborhood. And then there was option C, to construct an addition at Edgar Road and Clark, just like option A, but this one, we would convert Seeger and Hickson both to 6-8 middle schools. So that is kind of, that gives Givens, so it may or may not remain on the Seeger or Givens campus. All right, so there were some assumptions that we made with the options. Each of these does offer a long-term solution to our existing and projected enrollment space needs. Each option requires some degree of elementary and or middle school boundary adjustments. It could be a huge adjustment, it could be just a very minor adjustment depending on the option. Each of these options does provide any kindergarten student who starts at their school prior to the first year of implementation with the opportunity to remain in that school. So we would have implementation phasing. Allowing children to remain in the schools in which they start will more than likely lead to a slight temporary class size increase. It shouldn't be above what your ceiling is already. And it would involve a phasing out of the existing modular classroom. Modular buildings for classroom use will be discontinued after the phase-out period, and then each option does solve our elementary space problem through at least the 22-23 school year and maintain existing class size standards after the temporary implementation period. Moving on, so this is option A, where we would construct additions at Edgar Road and Clark. This would add a capital cost of approximately $7 million and an annual cost of $50,000. Because we're constructing additions, only minor boundary adjustments would be needed to balance enrollment. I'm sure you've seen this all before. The capital cost, again, $7 million, extent of rezoning low, number of students rezoned low. All the options allow for implementation phasing, and then the longevity beyond 22-23, and then the annual operating cost increases $50,000 again. Benefits of this, again, minimal zoning would be required. The cost is within the district's no tax increase bonding capacity, and this, for the record, does not include any safety, accessibility, and other space considerations. And this might be possible to implement during the 2020-21 school year. The challenges of this: students would need to remain on site during the construction of the additions at Edgar Road and Clark. It may impact socioeconomic balance between the elementary schools depending on where the boundaries are drawn, and it does require voter approval. So here are the results for option A. As you can see in this chart, about 62% of respondents did support this option. About 20% were neutral, and maybe 17 or 18% did not support this option. Some of the comments, the prevalent comments that we saw, construction during the school year is a concern. This does not benefit the whole district, just the elementaries. It is the least cost of the three options, so that's a plus. The longevity, the elementary schools are projected to be at 100% utilized again in 5 years. Minimal rezoning is very favorable to your community. They like the minimal change in the no class increase, and they very much like that it maintains class size standards. Moving on to option B, we would construct an addition at Hickson for the 6th grade and convert Steger into a K-5 elementary school. This option has a capital cost of approximately $16 million. Steger and Gibbons would then serve elementary students as either one neighborhood school or a neighborhood and a lottery school. Extensive rezoning would be required to establish an elementary attendance zone for Steger, given that it doesn't currently have one, and you would need to obtain all the students around that area. So again, extent of rezoning is high, number of students rezoned is high. It would cost approximately $16 million. The longevity of the plan is beyond 22-23, and the annual operating cost increase is a $100,000 one-time cost and then $200,000 annually. Some benefits of option B: it provides additional programmatic options for 6th graders. It eliminates a building transition for all district students. It enhances 6th through 8th grade curricular articulation and collaboration due to teachers, support staff, and administrators working in one building. The detached elementary zones that you currently have could be eliminated. The initial survey results demonstrated respondents' preference for this option. It would provide more district students and families with a neighborhood elementary school. Less money would be spent on transportation. Traffic could improve. The cost is within the district's no tax increase bonding capacity. Survey results demonstrated respondents' preference for a 6-8 middle school, and it provides a cohesive middle school experience. Now, some challenges for option B: rezoning would be extensive, again, because of that Steger boundary would need to be established. This will impact socioeconomic balance between the elementary schools. There will be some costs associated with moving staff and materials between Steger and Hickson. Hickson would be one of the larger middle schools in the state. Students would need to remain on site during the construction and the addition of Hickson. Traffic at Hickson would increase around start and end times. This would require voter approval. We would need to take two unique communities, each with its own identity, and merge them, and this cannot be implemented until the 2021-22 school year. So here is what came out for option B. About 58% of respondents either strongly supported or supported this option. It looks like maybe 15% were neutral, and then about 25 or 6% did not support this option. Some of the prevalent comments that we heard, this again maintains class size standards. 6th through 8th allows for more services, especially for the 6th graders. A larger middle school is a concern, as well as a higher cost. And then again, rezoning is a concern as well. The 5th to 6th and then 6th to 7th, the transition can be hard for students, so this would eliminate that. The uncertainty of givens is a concern, and then 6th graders moving up with 8th graders is also a concern. All right, moving on to option C. This option requires the same actions as option A, so additions at Edgar Road and Clark, and this would convert Steger and Givens and Hickson both into 6-8 middle schools. So the elementary, in the table below, you'll see it's the same table as the option A table because it's the same option for elementary. If you were looking at costs, this would cost between $15 million and $22 million. The extent of rezoning is low to high for elementary. It's pretty unknown what would be necessary there. And then rezoning would be very high for middle school because you would have to create 2 zones for both the middle schools. Again, number of rezoning or students rezoned is the same as the extent. The extent of implementation phasing likely is high for elementary, but very low for middle because you couldn't open a Steger middle school with 1 grade. The longevity of the plan is beyond 22-23, and the annual operating cost increase is $100,000 as a one-time cost and $115,000 annually. Benefits of this: more students would be able to walk at the middle school level. It provides additional programmatic options for 6th graders. It would eliminate a transition for 6th graders, or for all district students, less traveling for students and parents at either end of the district who are transporting to middle school. Smaller middle schools are always a good thing. Traffic at both Hickson and Steger would improve. More space would exist in each middle school, and initial survey results demonstrated respondents' preference for a 6-8 middle school, as well as a cohesive middle school experience. Some challenges: if the enrollments at Hickson and Steger are to be comparably sized, Givens Elementary would need to be relocated or phased out. District-wide grade levels, curricular articulation, and collaboration would be hindered due to teachers, support staff, and administrators working in 2 separate buildings. Again, support services would need to be duplicated, which increases operational costs. Give me just a moment. I just unmuted you. Is my thing not going?
It's not always advancing the slide with what you were speaking, so I didn't know if you...
Oh, okay. Sorry, I couldn't tell.
No,
I keep getting a notification.
That's good.
Okay, I'm going to mute you again.
Okay.
All right. So achieving socioeconomic balance between Steger and Hickson would not be possible. Sharing staff among the 2 buildings creates a variety of challenges, including flexibility with curricular programming. Students... Sorry about that. Students would need to remain on site during construction. Creating a comparable facility at Steger could be quite costly. Again, this requires voter approval, and the cost is not within the district's no tax increase bonding capacity. So the results for option C: about 25% of respondents either strongly supported or supported this option. We had about 15% neutral, and 59%, I'd say, do not support this option. Some of the prevalent comments that we saw: again, the uncertainty is given what would happen with that school. There is a worry that the location of the two middle schools could cause an imbalance in socioeconomic. It is a high cost initially and annually. Creating a similar experience at both schools when Speaker would be half the size of Hickson could be a problem. A lot of change would be required. Rezoning at both elementary and middle school levels is a concern. Again, 6th graders with 8th graders is a concern. 2 smaller middle schools rather than 1 large school in option B, so that is a plus there. And a tax increase would not be palatable to the community. So moving on, we also asked in the survey what the preferred option was, and overall respondents said that option B was their preferred option, followed by option A and then option C. So what we did, we took some of the demographic questions that we asked and split up the questions by the demographics. So what you're going to see in the next couple of slides shows certain groups of people, how they answered. So we will get to that. This right here shows all the options, just all the respondents and how they answered the options, just so you can kind of compare and see how they weigh against each other. All right, so this slide shows how the elementary parents responded. As you can see, option A, there was about 65% support. Option B has about 55% support, and option C is at about 29% support. The preferred option, again, is option A, followed by option B, and then option C. So a little bit different than the overall response, but fairly similar. Our next comparison that we did was the middle school parents. Option A, we're about 59% support. Option B, we have about 56 or 57% support. And then option C, we're at about 17% support. This one varies a little bit from the elementary school parents. Option B was favored in this one over option A. And then option C, as you can tell, is not very popular among the middle school parents here. Sorry, I'm waiting for the slides to change. Were you able, I unmuted you, were you able to see the elementary school parent comparison?
No, it went right through them.
Goodness. I don't know why it's doing this. Okay. I have it on elementary parents right now.
Okay, we'll tell you when it gets to that. There it is.
Awesome. Okay. So the slide that you see right now is the elementary parents and how they responded. I'm just going to keep you unmuted in case I get frozen again.
Okay.
All right, we're on middle school parents. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so this is how the middle school parents responded. Okay. So this comparison slide is a little bit different. So we took that preferred option question and we went through and tried to see the level of support that each option, everybody that responded that they preferred each option. I'm not explaining this very well. So this one shows the level of support of all the people that said that option A was their preferred option. So As you can guess, option A has a lot of support because these people preferred option A over the rest. Option B, we're at about 22% support, and option C, we're at about 10% support. All right. This is option B. So if the respondent chose that option B was their preferred option, this is how they responded to the rest of the questions. As you can see, we're at about 39% support option A. Option B has 95% support. And then option C, we are at maybe 16% support. And then this is that same slide, but these are the folks that chose option C as their preferred option. So in the chart, you can see option A has about 51% support, option B has about 55% support, and then option C has about 93% support. All right. Now, this slide shows how all parents responded. So whether they be a preschool parent, elementary, middle school, high school parent, or a previous parent, or a parent of a graduate, this is how they responded. So option A was got the most support with about 64%. Option B is about 58% support, and then option C has about 28% support. Interestingly enough, option B was the most preferred option for all the parents, with 240 people saying that it's their most preferred. Option A follows with 212 folks saying that they prefer this one, and then option C has 96. Now, this one shows the non-parents in the district. So option A for non-parents is about 46% support. Option B for non-parents is right about the same. And then option C is about maybe 17 or 18% support. So for the non-parents, option A was the most preferred option, followed by option B and then option C. And last but not least, we do have all staff, how they answered the survey. So about 41% of your staff supports option A.
Hey Karen, it's not there yet. The slide's
76
not there.
or so percent support option B, and then 31% support option C. The most preferred option, sorry, the staff slide is not here. I'm going to toggle them really quick. Okay. So again, all staff, option A, we're at 41%, option B, 77%, and then option C, we're at about 32%. And then option B was the most preferred for the staff, followed by option A and then option C. So just some next steps. So tonight we'd like you to review and if possible narrow the options. After that, the options will be taken to the building and finance committees, and the committees will prioritize all the building needs and develop funding plans for these options. We're going to seek community input regarding the building needs and funding plans, and then the presentation of the proposed building needs and funding plans will be at the January 5th board workshop. So that is all I have. If anyone has any questions, I unmuted you so I can hear you now.
I'd like to make a comment first and then ask a question. Can you hear me, Karen? This is Amy.
I can kind of hear you.
You can kind of hear me? Okay, well, the comment really isn't necessarily for your benefit so much as the rest of the board, and I just, as John mentioned earlier, we just saw this, and we are looking at lots and lots and lots of pages of comments, and having asked for community feedback, I think it's really important that we actually have an opportunity to consider the feedback that we've been given and read all of these, and I intend to do so, but because we haven't, I am not prepared to, you know, to say tonight that I strongly prefer any one of these options at this point. And then my question is, how, let's say we were to narrow it down to 2, how would we then, I can't tell from that last bulleted slide, and this is probably a Karen question, who then decides which one we proceed with, and how do they make that decision?
I could answer that. So,
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, the board will make the decision on the direction we decide to go.
So what do we get at the January meeting then?
So at the January meeting, what you're going to get is you're going to get a plan or plans. So tonight, so if we have 1 option, 2 options, 3 options, at that January meeting, you will get a plan for all the different facility things that we want to do. So accessibility, safety, everything like that, along with the different building options, and then what the funding plan would look like for all those things considered. So that's, and then you would also get, based on what those are, what were the comments and the feedback from community on those particular options and the particular funding plan as well. So what we're looking to do tonight, with certainly with respect, review, discuss, we got Karen on here for the data, is from based on what you've seen, do we have a possibility of narrowing it, all these options down before we go through the labor of creating proposals for all of them?
Anybody else have questions? Well, then ask them.
If I could just ask a quick one, and I asked Christine a little bit under, when we were just sitting here for a moment. Since I missed the last meeting, I apologize for being out of town. The option C, what is the origin of that versus what we had open houses and discussed? The 2 middle school option came out of left field for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that came back on just feedback, the last round of feedback and different comments. So there were 2 options that came out of that. It was the 2 middle school one, and then there was also the idea of making Steger a 5th grade center, 5th, 6th grade. And then, yeah, just that, adding on to Steger. When the board discussed both of those the last time around, so Bruce and his team kind of developed conceptually what this would be or what this would involve. I was a part of that too. The board decided, let's give a little bit more consideration to the 2 middle school options.
So how would this, and it's a follow-up question, the 2 middle schools would be 6 to 8 in this format?
Yes.
And the Steger Gibbons building would be only a middle school, which would then, I think per the explanation, would then either eliminate or relocate what is currently the former computer school, now Gibbons Elementary, to another location?
So there's a, depending on the size of the school that you wanted at Steger, it's quite possible that it would revolve a relocation of that school,
Okay.
a possible phasing out of that school. Yeah.
Okay.
And so Rob's here too tonight along with Bruce, because they're the ones also who, you know, we developed, kind of put numbers and tried to get as firm as we could because we wanted to get the information out to the community. So they're the ones who developed the estimated costs, looking at the Steger facility and everything. And so again, they could be involved if anybody has questions about those.
So a historical point that Keita may have brought up since she was at the meeting and I wasn't, back in the late 70s, early 80s, there were 2 middle schools at that time. Steger was 7-8, Hickson was 7-8. Those evolved out of what was previously 3 full-size middle schools with 7, 8, 9. So it's not an unheard of concept to have 2 middle schools. We had Steger, we had Hickson, both were 7 and 8 at the time. But also all the elementary schools were K through 6. And I don't know if I've had enough explanation or in what I can tell as far as what this would do to alleviate our capacity issues at the other schools, whereas this really addresses more the middle school issue and doesn't touch the elementary school side without additions to
Right.
multiple buildings.
This would, in more likelihood, if you wanted to have a little bit, because Hickson would still has much more space, we would still do option A. That's what's on the table, whether that's at Edgar Road Clark and or Hudson.
Right.
And it would more than likely involve, again, a relocation of the given students. So whether that program moves to a school like Hickson and is in that middle school setting, or a decision of, are those children then, do they go back phased out into their other elementary schools?
Or do those additions at those other elementary schools allow for
Right.
the addition of the given students to be there
Yeah,
now? Okay.
yeah.
So
yeah,
that's a
it in
possibility.
itself doesn't address.
Okay.
Yeah. David?
So, I mean, my sense from before was that it was something that we felt hadn't been sort of considered. It was up there, there was some interest, is this something that is feasible? And we really just wanted to go back and get some input on that. Also, what we were trying to do by going back to the second survey was, it was clear that some of the things neither appealed to board members nor appealed to everybody else. And so the combination of those made us say, let's go back and look at these other smaller alternatives. I agree with what Amy's saying in terms of this is a huge volume of material, and I don't think we can make certainly can't make a decision in terms of sort of one thing to go forward here. That said, I will say that I thought when we were putting the two middle schools up before, I thought it was a bit of a reach. I would suggest, although I certainly haven't done all the comments justice, I would suggest there's nothing that deters me from that. And so I personally wouldn't have a hard time and wouldn't feel it was disingenuous to go and eliminate that option, but still I would need to go and look at these and have much more consideration before I had any opinion between those.
I agree, based on the survey results, nobody liked it. I mean, by a long shot, C was so much lower than the other two. It seems like you could eliminate that.
And then the only thing I'd say about the survey is, I mean, the surveys necessarily, it's a group, it's the people who choose to respond back, and so I think, you know, to John's point, who's making the decision? The board is making the decision. So if as board members we thought, actually, you know, it's good to get this input, but ultimately we're the ones who are making, we've been, you know, tasked by the community to go and make what we believe are the best decisions for the outcomes for the students. Then we do that, you know, even if it came out the other way. So I guess I'm not driven solely by the survey. It's a broader thing than that. But I recognise what you're saying, which is there doesn't appear to be, however large or small the sample is, doesn't seem to be a whole heck of a lot of support for that one at all.
Right.
My only hesitation, I'm sorry, go ahead, Keita.
I was just going to say, historically, when we did have 2 junior highs, we also had 4 other elementary schools. So we didn't have, because like Shaw and actually 5 Shaw, there was 4 or 5 other elementary schools back then as well. So there really wasn't, the whole reason they closed was for
Declining enrollment.
declining enrollment.
You know, in the
Now it's-
mid-70s, so.
Yeah, so where I'm headed is, it kind of doesn't seem to really address the space issue to me, which is kind of what this is about. And so, since it's the least favored, I would not be against cutting that one out and balancing, trying to get more information and balancing the other two.
I was going to say my only hesitation about eliminating option C is, first of all, I haven't had an opportunity to read the comments, and there might be, well, again, the board is making the decision. I do want to make sure that we have the time to reflect and consider all 3 of these options. And the other reason being that, as I recall, Arnold was one of the people that was supportive of investigating that option of having 2 middle schools, and he is not here due to a family issue completely beyond his control, and I'm a little bit reluctant to X that one off without giving him a voice in this. So I think my inclination would be to, you know, I'm with you in the sense that that's the least popular option, and I don't want to waste anybody's time in investigating all of the details if that's not something that's going to be feasible. I'm just not entirely comfortable doing it tonight. I don't know how you all would feel about, just doing a quick email meeting, eliminate option C, yay or nay.
I agree with your points, Amy, because of the fact that this is such a lot of
It's a big
information,
deal,
and especially with C being such a different option than was considered, I think, and the voluminous number of responses. I mean, I just scanning through quickly some of the things. I think that there's certainly considerations to be further investigated before knocking one completely out. And again, because of the historical side of things, it's not unusual for districts to have 2 middle schools. Kirkwood has 2 middle schools, a lot of, and so, David?
No, I just had a.
I don't know if you were responding to my
I had a question. Everything we've heard we're seeing at the moment is all about the space issue. I just wanted to know, are there any, in terms of sort of safety and improving the safety and all that is obviously a very important part of this as well. Are there any sort of issues that as we're looking and thinking about these options from a safety standpoint that we should be taking into account that perhaps aren't being picked up at the moment?
Yeah, just to clarify a couple of issues. One is, as you look at the money that is the cost that's identified for each one of the options, and then compare that to what the district's resources are, and recently come up with a way to have the no tax rate increase bonding capacity of the district at about $23 million. So the money that would be left over from the space would be available for the safety, the accessibility, abatement activities that have been identified and prioritized, and actually the public surveyed on those and weighed in on the priority from the public standpoint too. So as you look at the capital costs that were identified for options A, B, and C, the difference between the space cost and that 23 million is what would be left over for those safety projects and the abatement and accessibility projects. When you look at option C, it's potentially the most costly. One thing to clarify those costs is that those costs are not based on any detailed design plans. They're based on, here's how much square feet we think we would have to add for each of these, and here's kind of what the standard cost per square foot is. When we take that and we actually go in and have to do some detailed design work, and Rob can speak to this, there may be other issues beyond just the standard, here's how many square feet and here's what that typically costs per square feet, with utility relocations, code compliance that we've been exempt from because we haven't done building additions. It's not just a matter of adding the extra square feet. We may have to do some work to the existing structure to get it up to code in order to get a permit to do that. And so there's those detailed, though, at least some better assurance that the cost estimates that we have put together so far based on construction standards are deliverable. If we're going to put a bond issue out there and we're going to say we want this, we're asking for approval of this amount, we want to make sure we can deliver what we're asking or what we're promising for that amount. And you can't do that with just rough construction estimates. We have to do more design work on that, and that's more than just time. That's now it gets into cost, it gets into money, and how many different designs are we going to try to work on for the different options. That was one of the reasons that it would be helpful to narrow it down to a more limited number of options so that we can limit the expense for those for that design work until we get a better sense of which option or two that we would want to try to move forward with. Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Never done an email meeting. That was an email meeting.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be a meeting, but we can just, my point just being that would obviously
Yeah.
be a public record, and, I support eliminating option C, I
Yeah.
don't, that kind of
But you're
thing.
being
I don't think it's
respectful.
going to be
You're being
controversial. I
respectful.
am just trying to be respectful
Yeah.
of people who
I
took the
get
time
it.
to submit
I
their
get it.
opinion, and to Arnold, who's not
I
here.
get it.
One more comment is, prior to the January meeting, and this might be a process. One thing that struck me just in glancing through these comments as we were sitting here is that there are a lot of assumptions, there are some misassumptions, there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
For example, things that jumped out to me with regard to option A, people commenting on the fact, well, Avery's still going to be overcrowded. Avery's, it's not fair to the kids that go there. With option B, some people said, well, we love this because Givens won't be impacted. Some people said we love it because Givens will be merged. So there are a lot of things that I think I need you as a board. I think we need you to answer for us before we're going to be able to make this decision. So I'm hopeful that you, meaning the administration, can go through and highlight or identify some of these because a lot of these things come up more than once, and issues that need to be clarified for us, but more importantly for the public, because if multiple people are answering these questions based on misconceptions, that gives me some concern about the confidence with which I view their responses.
Yeah. How do you all like that?
Well, they just
Because there are
some of them jumped out at me.
Yeah.
Those two, the other one,
Yeah.
a big one is I think that we have to be really, and I asked this question at the last meeting, but we have to be really, we have to be able to articulate, if we believe there is a benefit to having a 6-8 building, we have to be able to explain what that benefit is
Sure.
for everybody, because a lot of people commented that they didn't like that, some did like it. And then the whole issue of the middle school being too big, is that a real issue? Again, that's something we talked about at the last meeting, but I would hope we would have talking points for all of these, for some of the common themes that came up in the survey responses. I'm sure you've thought of them. It's not anything that you can't address.
And I know when we discussed this a few years ago, before Prop W failed, that part of that was to make Hickson a 6 to 8 center, but some of the finer bullet points in there that I think you're referencing, Amy, have been brought up in the comments of the interaction between students at each level. Will they be separated? How will the programming appear to be that, and this is specific to the 6 through 8 level. I think some of those things were talked about then, and John and Chris, amongst other people, would have recollection of as far as those discussions internally here, and I think those need to be revisited to see how many of those bullet points could be reestablished in support of how that would look at the 6 to 8 side. The other thing is, I think the wild card in this at the elementary level is what happens with the Gibbons Elementary School, because that is really going to be a decision. Because if we look at a lottery school, is that really Gibbons expanded to the lottery side, with the rest of the Steger building being the neighborhood part? That's also an issue of where do we feel like that would go if that was the direction. What would that look like? Because I think that would address a lot of the points were made about the people saying, well, I don't want Gibbons to go away. I don't want this to go away, or I want the school to be a bigger K through 5. Well, if you looked at the Venn diagram, you're covering a lot of those areas when you address those to the central point.
I think certainly we could do these things, and I guess the question would be,
There are things you're going to have to explain, we're going to have to explain to the public.
sure.
So I want to make sure that we know the answers before we
Sure.
choose.
I guess for me, the thing that's missing here, I see these options. What I don't see is what's the vision. And building on what Amy and Steve are saying, I see we'll go and put a building here, but I don't understand what the whole encompassing vision is for the whole thing. And it strikes me that before I can make a decision that I want to go and choose one of these options, I need to know how those pieces come together. I need to know what the vision is, because it strikes me that just as reading through the comments, people read different things into the same option. I mean, just some diametrically opposed views, in terms of that. For me, when I look at one of these options and say, yes, I like the idea of that, I may have a very different vision as to what that really looks like than what Amy or Joe or anybody thinks about. So I think that we need that to be fleshed out as to what that vision really looks like. How does this actually sort of come together? And it needs to address the points that Steve has made, that Amy is making.
So vision, because we set on this path because of our enrollment space needs. And these are the options that emerge. Now, obviously option A, I guess option B is the one that speaks to the, I guess solving what our quest was, and then in addition to what I would say is changing the educational experience for kids in our school system. Option A doesn't do that. It just doesn't. So are you speaking about a vision for each option, or are you speaking for an option?
And for each option that we're going to, we go, and perhaps what we can do is we can narrow this down to one or two, but then I still want to know what the vision is to make sure that the vision that I have for what I'm choosing meets, at least for me.
Yeah,
and it's
no.
something- and so it is, and so it says, okay, so let's say it's option B, but what does what does the building that is currently houses Steger and Gibbons, what does that look like?
Absolutely.
Is that one elementary school? Is that two elementary schools? Is it just a neighborhood school? Is it something of choice? What is, and there needs to be a vision for that, for instance. What is, Avery is still overcrowded. What is the vision for going and doing that?
Well, and I think option A contemplates vision as well, because if we are building at Edgar Road and Clark, what is the vision for Avery? What is the vision for the boundaries, for the redrawing of the lot? There's vision involved in all of them.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's just, Avery is just, I mean, if we add on to Edgar Road and Clark, we have to adjust boundary lines. I mean, everyone involves adjusting boundary lines.
Yes.
So that would be a process that we would undergo, following, the decision to move in that direction. That wouldn't be something that we tackled right now.
But what
That would
I'm
be a
not
community-
hearing, and tell me if I think this is what you're saying, is from the perspective of educators, this is why we would want to do this. This is why we would want to do that. I'm not asking you to say, I picked this idea, but I'd like you to pitch me all of the ideas. Like, this is what our district would look like if we chose this option. This is why this would be good for kids.
Yeah.
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 That's what, I mean, we're hearing a lot of nuts and bolts, but I'm not hearing, I don't think vision's the right word.
Yeah.
Christine?
So I did spend, I think, a good 45 minutes reading through the comments, and one of the questions I had was, what would the projected utilization look like if we made givens, in particular, in elementary school? And what would it look like for all of the elementary schools?
As far as the balance?
Is that information that we could?
Balance in terms of enrollment?
For me, it was balance of enrollment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the projected utilization. Now, there's another question that goes to vision likely, and I would hope to have that information closer to January. But, is Dr. Fields someone who can build a community-based elementary school where there hasn't been one in many years? Somebody else mentioned in here that the SES status would be affected. You'd already have a school that kind of is coming in with lower scores.
Yeah.
What is his plan what would be his plan to not only build the school community, but also to effectively decrease that opportunity gap? Because there'd be an opportunity for that, as I see it, with option B.
Kira, do you want to speak to the utilization? Are you still there?
I am here, but everything you say is pretty muffled.
Okay. So one of the things, from a capacity standpoint, one of the things that we had spoken about is that the current what we were looking to do at Edgar Road and Clark, adding on there, with the additions that you have, considering adjustments to boundary lines, 5 years from now, you would be at 100% utilization across the district, because the difference between the projected enrollment, and the number of seats, including the ones that we are adding, is about even. So we have kind of set a threshold of 100 to 110% of kind of being like a sweet spot. Once you hit 110, you go over. So the thing about the option B is that you're opening more space at both the elementary level, because you have a greater number of children that you could, through the rezoning process, which would be more extensive, more than likely, since would be creating a neighborhood school, but you would be creating more space across all the schools, and then you would also be creating additional space, obviously, at Hickson, a larger school, but with more space. So that's kind of is that what your first question was, Christine?
I think so, because the
And
projected.
to kind of go off of that, what I was telling John earlier is the projected enrollment for 22-23 is 2,227, and your capacity, even with the additions, is 2,235. So you're going to be at 100% in 5 years, which is not a bad thing. I mean, you're right where you want to be.
But at each of the schools.
What's that?
But at each of the schools.
Right, so then you would configure a line so that you're looking at comparable utilization at each of the schools. But again, you're basing it on projections, because you don't know, I mean, you're designing for multiple years out. So that's one of the things when we started looking at what would, drawing, that's why when if we were to come to that process next year, we would again come back to what our existing data was and consider projections when having to draw lines.
I don't want to jump in front of Keita because I
Oh,
know
I'm
she
sorry.
had her hand up earlier, but I do think that the current areas that are draw to Clark and Edgar Road from what is essentially the North Webster area, those will be addressed from the standpoint of when you make additions to any building or make a change to any building, that would be part of the redistricting and the analysis of what the diversity of each of the schools would look like if those drawing areas went away. I'm assuming that that's going to be part of the discussion, because that's going to affect your numbers, but that's also was established long before any of us were on the board, and so none of us was privy to the discussion as to why that was really done,
Yeah.
other than to affect the diversity numbers at Clark and Edgar Road.
Right, and I could say that option B is the only one for sure that allows for those catchment areas to go away. It would still provide an opportunity for those kids to continue on those schools if they want to continue going to Edgar Road or Clark.
But any new kids from those areas would
Option
change.
B would be the one that the board would be making the decision that there's going to be a neighborhood school there. Now C, A would not. A probably
would maintain those drawing areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
C, I mean, again,
No, A will have to go and alter the drawing area some, because if you're adding capacity at 2 schools, the drawing areas for those schools must expand, otherwise we'll end up with empty seats. I mean, it may not
from
do
a
it as
neighborhood
dramatic-
school component.
It may not do it as
It will.
dramatically, but it has to impact it some.
It will change some, but again, your schools are still going to be Avery, which you're losing space. You want to lose space from. And then Bristol, you really want to lose space from. So you may take the kids, and they would then be going to Bristol. That's, or, yeah. So
again, this comes back to my idea.
It's not a neighborhood.
So this comes back again to your vision question. I mean, how are you utilising the space that is currently? What is your vision for the best outcomes, if in terms of the way that you utilise the Stiga and given space,
Yeah.
for instance? I think one thing.
Educational outcomes.
Yes, educational outcomes, absolutely. Now, another thing I think that is, whenever we talk about these, we talk about rezoning and any of these other things, I think one thing that's sacrosanct is that anybody who's currently at these schools, we're not moving anybody who's currently at a school. And frankly, I would say also that we will grandfather siblings in as well. And I realise that may make things a little bit more difficult, but I would nonetheless say I would not support anything that wouldn't grandfather those children in. I just think that needs to be something we put on the table.
If it was their choice.
Well, that
By choice, yes.
our data doesn't. Our projections don't lend for that. So we would
Basically,
have.
it gives you about 5 years you have to work through it.
Well-
The children that are, the odd sibling coming through, yes, but basically it's the children who are there now, you don't want to start moving around.
So what, again?
Again, it's a vision question, though. I mean, I'm just telling you what my vision is for that tiny little aspect. What I need for you to do is to tell me what you think gives us the best educational outcomes for the children. And to me, again, that's what's missing here. It's what does that do for the outcomes? I see what it does with the space. I see what it does for moving, bodies around. But these aren't bodies. These are children who we are tasked to try to make sure we get the best educational outcomes for them. And I know that's where your heart is. And I know 100% everything you're doing is that's entirely always the way you look. So all I'm really trying to get you to do is to enunciate what I know flows through every fiber of your body.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where the bullet pointed or the support items or the clarification items lend themselves to more detail about that vision, but also gives us a framework in order to say, yeah, when it's put in these terms and when it's put in these in this vision, that helps sway me away from this option and towards this option, and let's eliminate this option, because that's that is going to help us from the standpoint of what the direction really is. Unfortunately, with the only thing about B that's really a difference is the fact that you've got neighborhood or you've got combo neighborhood and magnet. Well, what would it look like in B scenario 1 and B scenario 2? Here's the 10 bullet points as to what that
and
is.
Is there a third option there? Is it all magnet? Is it a much larger magnet school? I mean, there's,
Right.
again, but that's... And we can sit here and we can come up with options all over the place, and that's why, again, if there's a vision, it's something we can think about.
I'm looking for something to tie it all together. It's a lot of information, and I'm with David. I know that educational outcomes are what you all have in mind, but we have to be able to sell that, for lack of a better word, to explain it. Why do we think this is the best choice? It's because of kids. Why is it best for kids?
Even before we have to sell it, we have to believe it ourselves.
We have to believe it
and
before we
have
can
to understand
choose,
it ourselves.
yeah.
And I'm not in a position,
Absolutely.
until I have the vision, I don't know how I see this as being the best, getting the best outcomes. And first and foremost, because if I don't believe something, I don't believe it, I'm sure the rest of the board the same
Nobody else
way.
will
We
either.
need to believe in it before we're then going to go and take the community and say, yes, we believe, as your Board of Education, this is, what you have tasked us to do.
Can I ask to see if Keita has the points that she was going to make earlier, if there was anything that maybe hasn't been mentioned?
Christine kind of touched on what I was going to ask, and that was about if option B were to be utilized and Steger were to be made into a neighborhood school, what would that look like equity-wise, diversity-wise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
How are those lines be drawn? There'd be a lot of, there would be a lot of people who would be very happy, and a lot of people who unfortunately would be very upset because they would have an idea that they would be going to a lesser school, unfortunately. So what would be, I have every faith in Dr. Fields that he can make something wonderful out of it, but again, if that were to be an option, that would be something you would really have to sell.
A question on that, Keita. You had said that there would be the impression of someone thinking they were going to a lesser school. In what terms?
In the equity terms. to be-
Equity terms or
to be quite
performance?
frank. There would be, I can see some Bristol parents who would not, if their children were to be, and I don't, nothing against Bristol parents, I just know some of the attitudes. And there would be some, not being very pleased going to a neighborhood school. So again, if you were to do that, how would you sell it? How would you say, hey, this is actually beneficial? Fortunately, you would have to do that.
Knowing we're not going to make everybody happy, but as David said, we've got to feel good about the decision that we make, and we have to make sure that we all are or feel strongly about what we decide to do. This is not been at all
Okay.
helpful for you, has it?
No. I mean, I think it's just, we have to think, just,
So with regard to the option C issue, real quick, that doesn't require a vote. So we can simply let you know, and then as long as we're transparent and, you know, if anybody's interested in who says yes and who says no, we would provide that information. But it's not something that we have to vote on. So you can just, you know, get that information from us. I would say no later than a week at the
yeah.
most.
So the building advisory.
When do they meet?
They meet Thursday.
Today's Monday, okay, we can do it by Thursday, I think.
I'm curious, I was trying to look it up on my phone, it's too small for me to look it up quickly. Does C rise to the level that any of the options did that we saw
The first
last
time
week?
around, that's a good question.
I would say that C is maybe, I'd say it's a little bit above moving the 8th graders to the high school,
Which
How
was
about
pretty low.
option one?
which is pretty low.
Well, how about option one, which was do nothing?
Well, we can look. So let's look at what it was. Rob, could you maybe just, since we're all here, and we're just kind of talking about it, can you just kind of speak to some of, or Bruce, talk about just option C and kind of some of when you started exploring costs, facility, and just, it would just be easier than composing a lengthy email that kind of speaks to some of the physical challenge that is unique to that compared to the other options.
Right off the top, you have classroom sizes that are probably a couple hundred square feet below what a typical middle school square foot per kid class size would be. So not only do you have to go out and build all of your addition space, which would more than likely be your, like as your gym, art facts, all those, you would have to go back into the building and really figure out how you're going to program all of your classroom sizes to be able to meet the student population in this classroom. So it would be not only addition, but there would be some pretty drastic renovation space, interior-wise, to make almost all of the classrooms large enough. And it's almost like an impossible equation to do, because if you take two classes, eat up some square footage in a single classroom and add it to the next one, then you're right then and there, you're taking away square footage. And just to be able to make just one classroom sizable. Your additions that are needed, your gymnasium space. When you think about gymnasium space, also think about locker rooms and restrooms, hallway spaces. You're really, really lacking on the square foot of ground there in and around the building to even create that without taking away all of their upper asphalt outdoor playground space and probably a lot of the parking space. So there's some pretty distinct impacts by adding to that building also. And then we don't even know about the utilities, the sewer, the storm, the power that is needed, so on and so forth. You would be adding classes like industrial arts that don't exist there right now. That right there is a big power need right there, so it would be a challenge.
So one of the bullet point details to that would be you would have to essentially, without configuring and changing the configuration of the current class square footage, you would then have to say, well, your average middle school class in option C would be small, would have to be smaller
Yes.
at Steger, otherwise you encounter those issues.
Yeah, difference between like, I think there was one classroom I measured was only 684 square feet, where a typical design is 900 square feet. So it's a big discrepancy there.
So you're talking probably 20% smaller classes in numbers in order to fit the existing footprint.
Yeah, so if you take the student body, you would probably have to add classroom space along with all of your elective space. Gym, facts, industrial arts, bathrooms, and all that stuff. So it could really grow exponentially.
Bruce, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
That site is problematic from just a topographical standpoint, because anything you want to do, you're not doing it on level ground like at Hickson when we're adding Halloween. That's pretty straightforward. And Steger, if we start expanding that building, how to do that, even knowing that school is going to be in session and there's one entry in, and the work that would have to be done is kind of in the middle of where everybody's coming in there, so it's, the cost would probably escalate just because of the scheduling and the way that we would have to approach the staging even of the construction, much less even the topography of the building, and to provide an equitable facility in terms of the family computer or consumer sciences, the gymnasium, the other aspects of that building, to provide comparable equitable space is, that's why there's such a broad range of potential capital costs, is there's so many unknowns with that site. And you notice the range of that is larger than the range for any of the other options, and it's because there's more unknowns for that option that could be very expensive.
So in looking up from the past results, so this option C was at 26%, either supported or very supported. Adding onto class size had 17%. Creating a magnet at Hudson was 31%, and the 8th graders to the high school were actually 12%. So it was actually smaller. So, and we did kind of to the point, like we didn't, so maybe, you know, a month shy or a few weeks shy of sharing a more comprehensive vision. We did try to, in the strengths and the challenges, kind of articulate some of the benefits and the weaknesses for each of those particular schools to give you what would be the benefit of a 6-8, you know, from a curricular side, what would be like a drawback of having like 2 middle schools, but certainly fell short and not as comprehensive.
Well,
and
we're
that's
just
something,
not there yet.
And we
Yeah.
something
We're
we
just
could
not
do.
there yet. I'm not saying you, I mean,
Yeah.
we're not criticizing.
I wasn't planning, yeah, and I wasn't, no, but I certainly understand that when, you know, we get to that point.
When we get to the next step, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just to clarify the cost range for option C, when you look at the 15 to 22, that's not 15 to 22 that we're spending just on Steger, because as Mr. Lohr observed earlier, it doesn't solve the space problem at the elementary school. So the $7 million in additions at Clark and Edgar Road would still be needed to solve that issue. So $7 million of that range is still adding the same space
Yeah.
that was needed for option A.
All right, any other comments or questions?
I'm sorry.
Please.
No, I have a different question. So my sense is that there's a certain amount of a rush sort of to try to get something, because if we want to do something, a traditional time would be an April ballot. If, in order to do this properly, we need to keep it going. I mean, would a November ballot be, a terrible idea in order to go and get this right so everybody understands what the vision is?
Mm-hmm.
I more throw this out just as we're thinking about this. It may be that we all come together and all this comes together and it's really, really clear which way we should go. In which case I'm fine, and if that involves a ballot proposal, then I'm absolutely fine with that. But I would rather delay going and doing something and making sure we get it right.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, yes, we are mindful of the end of January and if we want to do something, but I don't think anybody wants to not have a thoughtful process or make a good decision.
No, I'm not suggesting
Just not sure how long it'll take,
again. I'm
yeah.
not suggesting I'm not suggesting you'll be making a bad decision. What I'm suggesting is that perhaps because there seems to be a lot more that we're not sure about, I want us to at least keep open the idea that we may need to delay. That's all. And I think just to sort of keep that in your mind.
Yeah. Well, what I can do is bring, again, as we kind of move forward, bring more of the vision piece of what you're speaking about, because I have high levels of confidence, but I'm not, what I'm saying, but I don't, what I've been very cognizant of along the way and Karen and Scott and my team could say, like, I'm like, don't let my bias get in this. Don't let my bias, as we're sitting here developing strengths and challenges, you know, just because I personally have my own opinion, a strong opinion, I've tried to keep that separate for this point.
But you probably have strong opinions about all of them, and that's what we want to hear.
I do.
Oh,
I do.
again,
But
I'm not
I
asking
did. But
you.
I didn't want that to influence what anybody, at this point, people's feedback. I didn't want to steer anybody any kind of direction at this point.
And it's more than just your opinion. So that, for instance, you talk about having a 6-8 center. So one of the things that's missing from that is, presumably, I think we've all talked about, 6th would largely be kept separate from 7th, from 8th, but that doesn't appear that doesn't appear boldly out there. And that, to my mind, is a vision aspect of how a 6th to 8th works.
Yeah.
You know, we understand that less transitions is better for especially children who have greater educational needs, but also keeping 6th and 7th and 8th so that they're relatively sort of separated is also an important part of that. And as I think about the vision, those are some of the practical details that I'm thinking about as well. And that doesn't involve your opinions. It's more just how does it work?
Well, one of the things we were also cognizant of was also that, if we had something listed as a strength, there, like we tried to be mindful to not, if we listed it as a strength, trying to be mindful of not adding on a lot also along the way. Like, again, I think I have been overly sensitive to not trying to be biased towards certain things. So certainly the next time around will come with full scope of curricular vision, everything that you're mentioning.
And again, I want to be able to answer some of the questions that are raised.
Yeah, for sure.
If I could just comment a couple of points that you might want to keep in mind as we talk about the time frame and what folks are comfortable with. We'll work with whatever the time frame and the decision of the board is. Rob, he loves a challenge.
Thanks, Bruce.
And Kathy, she loves a challenge too. The implication, April next year is the only date next year that the bond issue would require only 4/7 instead of a 2/3, so the bar's a little bit lower for passage, and that's one of the appeals of April. The other is that when we looked at the timelines that they would be I thought this was on here, when the plan could be implemented. Pushing it back from April to November would probably push the implementation back a year, since we would be starting 6 months later. So just to keep those in mind. And also the last thing is we're trying to be as judicious as we can on whether we order another modular building for Edgar Road. We're looking at if we happen to go with option A, then we would be adding space at Edgar Road and Clark, and that would be, if we went in April, we would be able to implement that, we believe, in 2021. So we just have a 1 year, 1 classroom-ish challenge to try to overcome, and in the balance is whether we order $350,000 modular or not. If we go with the option B for Hickson, we need to order it because that's not going to be implemented until 21-22. Folks are going to be grandfathered with the new neighborhood school and the redrawing the boundaries. That space crunch at Edgar Road is going to last for a long period of time. But if we go with option A, it's a 1 year issue, and Rob and I have been talking to the principal at Edgar Road, and we believe we can probably come up with a plan to avoid having to do that if we go with option A. We have to make the decision of whether we're going to order that modular building by mid-January, in order to get it manufactured and here and set up. So those are just the ripple effects of the timing of the decision. It's not a reason to rush a decision beyond what people are comfortable with, but it is a ripple effect.
Anything else like that? Perhaps I missed when this has come up before. Anything else like that we need to be aware of as we're thinking about this?
No.
That is the largest item right now.
I don't think it's unreasonable to set ourselves with the timeline of our January retreat, making a decision about which way to go and to recommend an April ballot issue. Because I think I don't think we're looking for a 50-page document of that vision that we were discussing earlier. I think it's just more, here's the fine tuning of, these are the more finer points that go along with what we're being presented. The whole, because of I wasn't here for the discussion of like potentially adding fifth grade to Steger and make it fit 5, 6, that sort of thing. I know that was discussed as well. But I think the overwhelming fact is, what Rob was addressing was, if you're going to look to do a lot at the Steger site, other than convert it to an elementary, you're looking at some fairly significant dollars. And if you do that, there certainly has to be a vision that to me makes that worthwhile of spending that money. I would have to be really convinced that doing something to Steger is going to make it worthwhile for that money to be spent. That's where I think it's coming down to. It's not just the numbers and where we put the kids thing for me. I think it's, are we doing the best for the dollars, the long-term solutions? Does this really help us at the elementary school level, which is probably our largest concern? That's why the leaning towards probably eliminating C doesn't frighten me. I think then it just becomes, what's the vision of A versus what's the vision of B, and then we can move there. So I don't think a timeline is unreasonable to make those decisions based on having just a little bit more viewpoint as to what that vision could be.
And I would agree that eliminating option C right now is not an issue. I don't want to put words in Arnold's mouth, but I think I found it language from last week. So when we heard the new options that were being proposed, I think we said who was going to be, wouldn't it be nice if we could have some feedback on that? I know I agree with it, and Bill agreed with it, and others. And we got that, and it doesn't rise to the level as some of the others that we looked at and went into last week. So to be looking at it and keeping it in the top 3 now, to me seems to be giving it unfairly.
I want to be respectful of the people that took the time, and you have had time to read it, I have not, 90 minutes and drive home, and I can't do it, so I want to take the time to, Probably right, and we've heard, I mean, it's certainly not popular, and I'd be surprised if I didn't agree with you, but I'm going to be respectful of people that took the time. So that's just, you guys can think, probably you guys can tell from the consensus of the room that you guys know
Well,
more than likely what we're headed.
What should I, with that particular one, is, to call Arnold, I could talk about it, I could give more thoughts and whatever, propose
We
it.
just need time to read what we have.
Well, the other thing is, you had mentioned what your opinions are. I don't know if the vision details that we would be looking for involve an opinion, more is it just, if this is what I was so told we were going to do, this is how it would look. I'm not saying you should lean towards one thing or another, it's just this is how it should look. We can always get to that point where we can say, okay, John, tell us what you think. Or, okay, Chris, tell us what you think. Sandy, Tim, John. We can get to that point, but I think it's just you can still take yourself out of that enough to give us a vision of, let's look at B, let's look at it from let's peel one more level of the onion back and see what it's gonna look like. Let's peel one more level of the onion back on A. We probably won't have to spend that much more time on C, and in fact, by the time we all look through this and building advisory meets on Thursday, we may even be able to say by then, let's just completely eliminate C. So one more layer of the onion doesn't mean that you have to take a stance.
Well, I will work with Amy and David to make sure that, when the time comes, that I'm getting you guys exactly what you want, for sure.
Because I think that vision's going to affect how some people will probably vote, should we do put it on the ballot.
Oh, I have 100%, I know. for sure.
And the one thing that we have, and I'm sorry, Dave, you were, is the one thing that we have now is the hindsight of looking back to know that in 15, we all on the board had a very clear vision of what W was going to do, but I don't think the public in general had a really strong feeling about what it was going to do. There was a lot of other things intermingled with W. There was Moss Field considerations. We aren't trying to rope in a whole bunch of other things with this. It's going to be, this is what we're recommending. Here is how it would be done. Here would be the vision. Here are the potential costs. We would love your support.
Karen, thanks for hanging on the line. I should have told you to go.
No, that's fine. I'm enjoying listening.
All right.
Thanks,
All right,
Karen.
take care.
Okay, this one.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.
First and only opportunity for public comments. The board welcomes questions, ideas, and comments from persons in attendance. Members of the audience may comment during the comment portion of the meeting. We recognize that the president, we ask the comments be limited to 3 minutes in order to complete the agenda within a reasonable time. Please provide your name, address, and school district in which you reside. Mr. Buck, I should have your address memorized.
Buck, 124 South Elm. I'm in the Webster School District, Groves District, and my grandson is in 4th grade at Bristol. What's the first letter of my last name? Option B. I've been very consistent, at least, and I'm still there. I think this is a slam dunk, but that's all I'm going to say. Amy, I think you're exactly right. You've got this whole deck. Nobody has really had time to go through it. So by all means, do not take a final vote today, and you're not. Take it later. But I would say that as good as technology is, to do a follow-up meeting by email or Go Meeting or where people are on their phones or on your computers in your homes and not here face-to-face talking this out, I think would be a huge mistake. You all have put too much time, too much money, too much effort into this huge, huge initiative for the district, and to make final decisions on the phone, I'm sorry. What you all did tonight was terrific. Face-to-face meeting. You know, you guys had a little debate. You guys shared some comments. What I wish you would have done tonight is that I think it would have been okay to say, on first impression, what options did you like? We're not holding anybody to them. You can change later once you have a chance to go through the data. We just want your first impression. It's like meeting a person for the first time. What's your impression? Option B. Anyway, David and Steve, I'm going nuts on your comments about vision. First of all, this district has a vision statement. If you didn't know, it has a mission statement and it's got a vision statement. In talking with John, I think John knows exactly what those criteria are to handle enrollment increases and space increases. I think he knows what that vision is, if you want to call it a vision or a plan or criteria, but I think they already exist, and you all quite honestly should know what they are by now and not at this late date. And then the last thing is that the comment on option B about Hickson being, it's going to be the second largest middle school in the state. Well, the thing is, that would be a 3-grade school. Those kids are all going to a larger building, which is our high school building, where there's 4 grades in it. So that just doesn't concern me very much. You can take that off of your vision, Dave. In other words, there are other things that are important, but it's not a vision for the district. That already exists. You just need a plan, criteria to assess, to make your decision. That's it. Thanks.
Hello. So I'm Alex Kahn, reside at 250 South Old Orchard in Webster. Got a 4-year-old son named Nicholas. He'll be attending Edgar Road as a kindergartner next year, and both my wife and I are products of a public education. I've really enjoyed attending the meetings over the past few months. Went to Global Brew and personally met several of you, and then others I've met at the meetings. And as a parent of a young child and a product of public education, I'm just super passionate about the long-term health and success of the Webster Grove School District. I'm really just here to formally introduce myself, and I did want to declare that I plan on running for the Board of Education. So thank you for your time.
Other public comment? All right. At this time, we do have executive session on the agenda, so I will entertain a motion to recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel.
I make a motion we recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel.
Second.
Mr. Laura?
Yes.
Ms. Keller? Yes. Mrs. Dahl?
Yes.
Ms. Clendenis? Yes. Mr. Edison?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn?
Yes.
Take a short break, we'll regroup in 5 minutes.